So a warm welcome, everybody. Fourth one, our virtual seminar today again, big LPM idea. So I'm really pleased to see many familiar faces, and also would like to extend my congratulations to those who managed the time zones again from very early, close to San Francisco. Jim, is that correct? Where
Yes.
are you based? Yes. Two, I'm just trying to think who's the most actually eastern, who's sitting in the most eastern spot. Most likely it's us German folks. And then down to the most southern parts of South Africa, Joburg. So warm welcome in particular to you as well, Naomi. And I'm looking forward to today's agenda. It's quite packed, but packed with a lot of substance and a lot of actually interesting aspects. So first of all, we'll hear from Kevin and Lann about task codes and KPIs. So we really look forward to that, because in most exercises and in most practices that we see in terms of LPM, we always talk about how we can actually structure processes and projects more and matters and find efficiencies, but we tend to forget to actually discuss how we would like to actually identify those. And according to Mr. Deming, if you can't measure it, and you know the remainder, it's not worth it. So therefore, they play a vital role, but they're usually quite easily overlooked. So great topic. Thanks for that. Then we'll see, or hear rather, from Jim about the latest actually developments at SALI. So if I may say that, Jim, you're Mr. SALI and Mr. Liedis. So you know best what's going on in the world of task codes and meta codes and so forth. So that will be, we surely actually will look forward to actually get an update on that. And then last but not least, today I see my colleague Julian actually was joined. Julian will give us an update on workflows and workflows in the context of legal project management and process management, also with a little bit of a world premiere, actually launching a common creative canvas. So that's something to finish off. Without further ado, may I ask you, Kevin and Lann, actually to briefly introduce yourselves, because as always, you can do this much better than I will ever be able to. And
Sure.
then your floor, please.
All right, Ignace, thank you very much. My name is Kevin Bielawski. I'm the Director of Legal Operations at Husch Blackwell Law Firm. We're around a little over 700 attorney firm, mainly based in the central part of the United States, with offices as far east as Washington, D.C., and as far west as Sacramento. Been in this role for about 2 years. Prior to that, headed up the legal project management and pricing functions of the firm, and have Lann, who is our Associate Director of Legal Project Management, on board today. He and I and others on our legal operations team, operating under the legal operations umbrella, involve client onboarding and pricing and matter management. That is one of our first big ideas, is to change the name from legal project management to matter management or matter lifecycle management. We get, many of our attorneys give us that deer in the headlights look when we start talking LPM or legal project management. When you talk matter management or matter lifecycle management, it tends to resonate a little bit more. So we have the thrilling topic of task codes and KPIs. We'll try to make a little bit entertaining. It's a pretty dry topic if you don't work with it maybe on a day-to-day basis. But the whole concept of the book and where are things headed, you have to take a quick pause and look at where you are today and some of the things we think about in terms of KPIs are, from the law firm side, are you migrating to a profitability type KPI? Are you still hung up on a legacy metric like realization that really doesn't give you much? And then from the client side, and Lann can talk a little bit about more on the the client value side and what that looks like today. And Lann, what do you think about the client side of things?
There's definitely a lot of movement away from just the financial numbers, and certainly those are still very important, but layering on, everything from what's happening on the diversity front to things like hygiene factors, other kind of value metrics in terms of the cycle time.
Bluetooth ready to pair.
And there's just so many things that are kind of being layered on top of financials today. And the kind of core to what our chapter is about is really thinking about categorization at different levels, looking at matter types, looking at task codes and some of the underlying aspects that can be captured even at a lower level than a typical task code. And then how do all of those roll up into KPIs, and trying to think about it both holistically, but then also with a future orientation, because we're kind of at an inflection point, or we're approaching an inflection point in the industry where a lot of the challenges in doing this work well on a consistent basis that are all tied to the individuals doing the work manually, tracking themselves with the codes, will likely start being done by machines. And when that takes place, there's just this huge opportunity to leverage data that is much harder to use today unless you have some really good practices in place.
Yeah, some of the, I may be coming at it from a pessimistic point of view, Lann, and in my experience, many of the clients out there still look to pretty rudimentary KPI rate and what discount they're getting, and as hey, that's how we are measuring value. Do have plenty of data points that we can look at, or experiences we can point at and say, okay, this client is starting to migrate away from that. They see the value in a cycle time type of range, to figure out, are we lowering cycle time quarter over quarter or year over year? One of our more recent engagements is with an in-house legal ops professional who, we do their real estate work, pretty decent sized company, but we're pretty much their guinea pig in terms of putting together a non-hourly arrangement that is focused on transaction costs. So like lease amendments, for example, we have a bucket of work that we know there's, probably 80% of the activity in there is related to lease amendments. And so we know there's another 20% that's hit and miss on some other things. But if we know the number of lease amendments we do in a given year, we can just use that as your denominator into your total fees for that bucket and start to come up and look at historical per transaction costs and start pricing it based on that as opposed to the hourly rate model. So I think it seems to be slow to be adopted on a lot of our clients. I'd say more advanced clients are light years ahead of most of the, you can look at some of the high profile in-house legal groups out there and just based on reading industry information about where they are with those KPIs, just very interesting.
And I think the key to that, especially when you're engaging people who are a little bit more sophisticated, is to have peers in-house in the legal operations roles who can really understand not only where they are today and how they're getting their arms around their data, but where they want to be and how they're trying to report that information up into their organization, both up to the general counsel and also to the business. So, being able to exchange that data on a regular basis so that you can benchmark things, so that you can price things or provide options for different kinds of arrangements is really critical. Just having that person on the other side that speaks the same language, that kind of knows where to go with certain things and how to think about certain things a little bit differently.
Yeah, I think those folks are a little more willing to share data as well. I can think back to one of our bigger healthcare clients that, they did I'd call it a convergence initiative on steroids, because they had already pared down their firms to about 15, 16 firms, and they wanted to take it from that number down to one firm handling, 95% of their work. And when we were involved in that, they gave us 3 years worth of data, and they had categorized it in what they deemed in their head as, this is how we think about it, which is always great data to have. It always helps you focus in on, okay, how does our work tie into the way they think about it? And you can come up with, okay, we believe an annual flat fee is going to look like X. But that sharing of data is just such a critical role, critical component to those types of engagements and getting it right. And if the expectation is law firms better come to the table with data as well. And what is that data telling you? Not just for that particular client, but across your platform. If you're in X number of locations and all those locations are doing similar type of activity, what does it look like? And so being able to have, whether it's the task codes, or we actually started, we call it matter types. This was maybe a year or two before Jim and the SALI initiative got going. We saw a need for, okay, we gotta go up one level from task and activity codes to start tracking matter types. And within our practice areas, there's likely matter types that, those matter types are being worked on 80-85% of the time by the folks within those practice areas. And once we started to meet with those individuals within the practice area and start to get some coding around those matter types, it's funny that the attorneys tend to look to the rarity, the rare matters. They love to talk about those things that happen once every 5 years, and that just isn't really a good data point that you want to be. I mean, it's fine to track, but it's really not it's not what is happening within that practice area on a day-to-day basis. And that's, I think, where you find more value if you're able to get the day-to-day coding of matter types figured out.
And that's also something we stress a lot is in the different areas of the chapter, just because this is an iterative process. The first time you go in, you either can be on one side of just having this enormous list of, as Kevin was mentioning, all of the minutiae, all the variations of things that people have done over time. Sometimes you get the other side and it's just a super short list that makes it very difficult to really get any kind of meaningful kind of details out of that. And just kind of going through this process with the different stakeholders throughout a number of leadership changes in team composition, all of these things that influence what that list is ultimately going to look like. You can get down to something that's actually quite useful, but it's kind of a daunting exercise in the beginning because it's not something you can tackle in 3 to 6 months. It's not something that's going to be finished after the first kind of time that you go through it. And then you're dealing with the environmental factors. But if you stick with it, we have found both, from a matter types standpoint and task codes and KPIs, you really can get some really helpful information. And I think just encouraging folks who are here and then also who might be listening later to really think about the long runway and just to continue to think about the ways that you can use this data going forward, because that's really the future. And that's one of the things that I think we're trying to do in this conversation and in the chapters, to think about, what does this look like 5 years from now, 7 years from now? How can we get to a place where when the technology allows us to do new and different things, we can actually put that in place and learn some things from the data that we have?
Yeah, I mean, in my mind, we all experience being on the internet and either purchasing a product or a service. And some of the interfaces out there are just so friendly to the user. And so we talk a lot internally about the UX and the CX and how are we integrating this data, this plethora of data that we have into that experience, particularly as they're engaging with us. Because in Lann, you brought this up in a conversation you and I had earlier this week, just that for those in the United States, you'll probably understand the concept of a Kelley Blue Book value. And for those outside the US, that is a auto industry reference guide to know what the value is of a particular product, particular car. So, you know, where or when will we get to a point where the legal industry will have the equivalent of a Kelley Blue Book value related, or, you know, wrapped around matter types, where if I'm in the in-house side, I'll be able to quickly reference that and see, oh, this, you know, this OSHA litigation in the state of Texas should run about X, or a range between X and Y. And so, you know, gathering that, you know, using that data and having that type of that type of a data point available, coupled with, if you're engaging with a client and they're going through a UI that your firm has created, where they can add, you know, click on a few boxes to give some metadata, you know, is this a buy side transaction or a sell side transaction? Is it asset based, or, you know, how many employees of the company you're buying? And you go through and give some, you know, variables around a particular M&A transaction or litigation, and all of a sudden you've got this range that you can quickly, you know, produce and push in front of a potential client or existing client to know what they're getting, you know, what they're getting into, and setting the expectations around the cost of a particular, you know, piece of work. So.
I also wanted to mention one of the recent proof of concepts that we participated in. We worked with a company called Digitory, but there's a number of others in that space that can analyze time entry data. They have a kind of a hybrid approach of using machine learning and some AI technology with kind of lawyer review to read narratives and then code things in certain ways, both at a task level and then also at a lower level. And we were using it to kind of figure out, in some ways, from narrative data that we thought was actually coded very well, how well our current practices were doing, as well as, you know, what the opportunity would be and where we needed to focus going forward. And, you know, as often is the case, the technology has come a lot farther and is able to do things than we even anticipated. And, you know, some of the challenges are still the things that we would normally talk about in terms of reducing block billing and things like that, because it's not only good practice for the client, but it helps today the machines learn better as they're looking through your data points. But the other thing too is just that there are certain things we're going to need to do as we write our narratives, so that we can kind of bucketize some of those lower level items, and then use, you know, and quantify, for instance, what the range of depositions costs in this particular case. And if we're trying to add a few more depositions, you know, of a certain kind, really anticipating at a very detailed level what that cost might be. So there's a lot of opportunity even today just to start figuring some of those things out. And that's just encouraging to me, because it kind of shows a little bit about what that runway might look like down the road.
The one area of technology that I haven't, and it might be out there and I'm just not aware of it. So if anyone today knows of this, please let me know. But I'm, you know, where is, you know, you have companies like a Digitory out there who are doing this AI type human review. You know, where's the application that sits between your time entry system and your accounting system that's watching every single, you know, time entry description come through and evaluating it and assigning a code to it? Like that's where it needs to be. And you train up that system on, as Lann said, we have a few practice areas where we know we're really rock solid with our coding, and our little pilot proved that out. Okay, so we feel like we got some good data. Where's the application that we can train on our existing data that we know is good, so that, you know, attorneys and you know, legal assistants never have to put a code in again? And that's where, and so if that's out there, please someone let us know, because we're really interested in that little application sitting in there. So, Lann, you mentioned that you know, machine coding. I think that's where we're headed. The Kelly Blue Book value that we talked about, and I think this might be a decent segue into Jim and the SALI work that they're doing there. And I'll pose this question to Jim. It's love the work you guys are doing. I know you and I have had a couple conversations around that. Where is SALI going to be in 3 to 5 years in terms of, if all of these law firms, if you flip the switch and all the law firms are using SALI and the in-house groups are using it, what does it look like? How do we harness that data? Or will only a few, like a third, like a legal tracker, they'll be the ones that have that data, or an in-house group, they have their own data. Where can you harness that data so that it's shared across the platform? Is that the role SALI's going to play? I was just
yes, that's what we're trying to.
Excellent.
So, can I share, Ignaz?
I just need to make it. Let me just see.
Sure. So while you're doing that, that is a perfect segue, Kevin. I noticed you're speaking today in your topic. I thought, wow, what a excellent partner to speak about what I'm going to talk about. So it's a couple of themes you brought up. Or Kelly Blue Book, by the way, is a brilliant analogy. I haven't thought of that one yet, but it is in terms of a pricing resource. Let's see. So okay, let me try now. Let me just step back. So my chapter was about how we need to define legal work as deliverables, right? As end products. What project management's all about, right? I'm right now in the middle of an accounting system project implementation, and our project managers give us deliverables and scope and a very detailed understanding of what we're receiving, right? But if you look at a typical scope statement for a law firm and a client, it doesn't anywhere near as detailed or have the kind of the output defined. So that's what my chapter is about. And SALI is trying to do is, how do we define the data in a way that allows us to do those things, to project manage, the price, to understand, the process these lawyers go through better. So we're all on the same page in terms of the data that undergirds it, right? That explains it. You mentioned also how, you get data from clients. It's interesting, but, it's probably, you have to probably massage it and redefine it and all that. That's really inefficient. So just to level set, what SALI was about originally was the idea of let's all give the same things, the same category names, right? The same, and in terms of the industry, right? Can you see my screen now?
Yes.
Okay. So I just want to jump to this slide. Before I get to that, though, let me just talk a little further about what SALI was. So SALI was formed, the purpose of it was to give structure to the things that pricing people need when they define matters at the top level, a matter type. And you talk about matter type. So right here is a slide that summarizes the output that the first standard we released back in February of this year. These are the key components: defining areas of law, defining the service, which is what the lawyers provide, and then the industry involved, and also other things like, individuals involved, jurisdictions, so forth. This model here shows you kind of how we try to streamline the initial matter type level. So matter type isn't just about patent law, or it's not just about litigation. It's about a lot of things, but we need to define them cleanly, because in the industry, firms do it, clients do it. We all mix these things up, right? And if you look at our categories, they're all over the place. How do I know that? I know that because all the inputs I had when we did our first standard exemplified that, right? So this was the first step, was defining these things. I'll get to the implementation and all that, Kevin, in a minute, but it's one kind of level set, like I said here. The goal of the initial standard was to answer these kinds of queries from clients and firms. What are the things you need to know to understand the work we do, or work you can do for me? So this is it's a little bit of a cluttered slide, but let me explain what this is. So think about the three stakeholder types we have. We have clients, firms, and other organizations selling legal services, and we have vendors, software vendors. The same concepts, like for example, banking law, is defined differently by every one of them. Every one of them. Nobody has the same name for that. Why not? It's a basic thing, right? It's not complicated. It's a very straightforward thing. There's no reason why we can't have one code in the back end defining this concept. That's what SALI's trying to do. We're trying to define the concepts in a way that then can be implemented by any organization, mapped to what they have legacy, and then we can share data to our heart's content. That's the summarize what SALI's about. Real quick on adoption, where are we? We have around 10 firms that we know of that have adopted the standard. give or take, some are complete, some bits. A few weeks ago, NetDocs announced they'll be implementing the standard in their service. And we have a project for software vendors that we're calling interoperability, which is about defining these things between themselves, right? So all the vendors have the same definition for them within themselves. So for example, Thomson Reuters, Intap, Lexis, Wolters Kluwer, we're trying to get all them, and we are succeeding. We're getting them to talk to define these things in one thing. So then that makes the cross-system capabilities happen. So, and talk about task code. So what is LMSS vis-a-vis UTBMS? And by the way, I want to give some background on myself. So I'm Director of Legal Project Management at Coblenz, Patch, Duffy, and Bass in San Francisco. I've been involved in legal innovation projects for about 10 years, beginning back at Fenwick and West around 2010. So I've been, how did I get involved in standards? I was just frustrated like you are, Kevin, about the data quality, right? Why don't we have a common language for this stuff? So that's how I got into this. And I'm also on the board of LEADS, so I'm very involved in what LEADS is doing with the codes. But just to give you an understanding of what we did and how it complements UTBMS, the original version of the SALI standard just touched on this level, which is, area of law, jurisdiction. And as we all know, UTBMS is about this level, phases, tasks, and so forth. So that's how we complement each other. But the next version of LMSS, we are reaching into this level. I'm going to show you that in a sec, what I'm talking about when I say that. So let me jump to, actually, let me step back. Kevin, tell me what in particular I should touch on now based on what you said. I'm trying to think, there's so many things you brought up.
Yeah,
for sure. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, the matter type, which is at just one step, a couple steps up from the task and activity and time entry level, just help you categorize and then get to quantifying how many of those did you do in a year? What was the range of price on those? What was the high? What was the low? What was some of the other metadata maybe driving some of those outliers? So you can start to unpack that a little bit.
As we know, law firms define matters as projects, right? As a project, the deliverables aren't defined. If they are, it's in an email or a scope statement that's buried somewhere. So to get to that level of, granularity with counting things, counting depositions, counting expert reports, dollars or gigs for document review, right? That kind of stuff. We have to have the data to support that. And that's what we're trying to get to, and I'll show you in a sec. But yeah, so, we really understood that this is where we need to go, and we want to, and my goal is to help both LEADS and us and SALI, collaborate together. That's where we're going to. And then LEADS has some projects too regarding, for example, IP. There's a project to totally overhaul the IP codes because they're really not that useful, in my opinion, for what they need to do. But anyway, let me jump to another page. Tell me if you can still see my screen.
Yes.
Everyone see this?
Yes.
Okay, great. So we rolled the standard into a new software product from Stanford University that's free for the public to use for taxonomy development called Web Protege. And this is an amazing tool to allow us to build a taxonomy. Before we were all living in spreadsheets and emails and and all that and phone calls. It took a long time to develop, but this thing has the entire standard right in front of your face. So these are all the categories, like for example, area of law. These are the original categories we released this year on all the areas of law. Service is down here. Service is things
Jim,
like.
I don't think we were seeing the same screen.
We are only seeing the PowerPoint presentation.
Yes.
We're still on your LMSS, but vis-a-vis
Oh,
BMS.
sorry. Let me. Don't want you to miss that. Hang on a sec. Thank you. How about now?
Yep.
Yes.
Good. Sorry, so this is on Web Protege. So this is the taxonomy development tool Stanford designed and allows for the public to use. And over here are all the categories we have released and are working on. So area of law, for example, all the areas of law we just talked about, these are released. Services down here, services are the work lawyers are doing. It's not about the area of law. So it's litigation, it's transactions, it's advice, no matter what the area of law is. That's where we have the data, confusion is when those things get
natural male enhancement.
So where are we going with SALI? So like I said, the first release was for the top level matter type, but now the second release we're working on gets more into the practice, and how that ties into the business is where we're trying to make those worlds meet. Because the practice, you define the practice well, then you can define the business side. So for example, all the motions are in a lawsuit, well, they're all spelled out, but they're not in our scope statement typically, or they're not defined. A lot of the inputs here we use came from products like RFP tools, which are trying to templatize scope, right? And so I took a lot of what they had and offered, and try to offer what they do in a way that provides that structure. So, for example, here in litigation, these are replicating what the task codes do, right? So, for example, let's see, up here we have deposition practice, expert, pleadings. These are all the things that you can map to UTVMS, but we're trying to build in more structure and form to them. The task codes themselves are limited. They're very broad. They have no flexibility. You can't break them down further very well. You can't, sometimes the phases overlap, right? So the whole concept of the phase buckets, if you remember, L100 is a phase, but it's also used as a task, and that's wrong, right? So we're trying to help bring that structure that we need for all the things we're trying to do in the industry to the service, right? So getting back to implementation, and Kevin, you're asking about how do we get the industry to move forward? So basically what we're trying to do is we're finding pockets of organizations that are ready to implement the standard while we're working with the vendors to offer it off the shelf in their products. That's the key. Once they start doing that, then it'll be much easier for organizations to build it into theirs because they have that support, right? That back-end support that is not really existing right now in software. So for example, in the accounting system that I'm talking about putting in, that's just structure is not there at all for us to do this kind of stuff, but we need to get them to do that. So that's our goal, is to over time get people to gravitate to understanding that we need this data to do all the things we want to do. And the clients are getting it. Clients, so Microsoft is picking up again with us. They were one of our original partners, and they are once again getting very involved, and some others as well. So I wanted to reiterate how what we're doing here is trying to build, not just, we're not trying to just replace the existing data. We're trying to provide the framework for much more sophisticated, data analysis and machine learning. So, for example, a lot of these litigation concepts, a lot of machine learning can be used to categorize this stuff. I have no doubt in my mind, based on looking at working with someone on the litigation stuff. A lot of the things you see are buried in complaints and motions and opinions and all that. It's a matter of, figure out how to do the mapping, and that's a future goal. But that's what we're looking forward to do, which is letting the software get 80% of it, and the human can do the rest.
Jim?
Yeah, the good news, Jim, is we're currently, because we run the largest legal ops operation project for a client with 180,000 users on ServiceNow, and we're just actually at the moment we're extending their core tables. So what we're doing is, because ServiceNow is the latest kid on the new kid on the block at the moment in terms of legal ops support, and then they're having discussion with Dell and the likes, and then we're just using actually a concrete project that's going on in order to just look at the tables, latest release, and just extend those and add all those SALI categories. And you've shown us actually a huge depth in terms of actually structures, but it's already adding a lot of benefit just actually using the top level actually top level elements and implementing those. That's actually already a quantum leap in terms of actually data quality that you can draw from those kind of actually systems. And in particular, coming back actually to my experience at Allen Overy, where we actually rolled out Thomson Reuters Elite 3 experience management. Every single partner had a different idea of what the category for a specific matter should be called. Right. So we ended up actually with category types just for legal matters of close to 100 plus. And there was no description. It was not unique, so it was completely discretionary at the end of the day. And that led actually our knowledge database was as complicated as it was actually before being implemented. And so for that, we would have actually needed at least one AI tool, if not more than that, in order to actually get all the data out. And that's actually sort of defeating the purpose of structuring your data in the first place.
One thing we're noticing is that we're saving organizations a lot of pain that are trying to implement this, because, as you said, it is a struggle to get everyone in your firm or organization to agree on this stuff. It's just the opinions come in and everybody's got their own. But if you say here's a standard that the industry's accepted, that's it, and others use it, we have no choice. Then it's much different, you know. And we know that we succeeded because we have had, in terms of comments on the first standard, very little pushback on any of them. I mean, it's really, I'm not trying to pat myself on the back or us, but I think we went through the proper due diligence to get the right feedback to get something that we knew would work. So that's been very, very heartening. If you want to see how to implement in a law firm the standard, ILTA this year, Golson and Storrs and Schulte Roth presented on that very thing, and they talk about how they did it. There's multiple ways to do it, you know. But just to pass it on to anyone that's interested. Another thing that I should mention is we are building with intent on global, support. The initial codes were U.S. centric, but they can easily be changed and modified, and this tool lets us do that. This tool lets us change, offers a lot of ways to have other, synonyms and references and so forth that I'm not showing yet. But we plan to have. We have a Canadian rollout coming soon that's been worked on for quite a while, and I'm working on UK and acknowledge you're going to help me in Europe, right? So the goal of that would just be to give the labels the right name for the different jurisdictions, and also add things, track things as necessary.
But the groundwork has been done by just actually establishing the structure per se. That was actually sort of the
right. So the framework
to get it going.
Yeah, this framework that you see at the top level here is applicable across the world, we think. I'm sure there's maybe some things that you can add, but we think that these fit everywhere we need them to fit. So all you need to do then is, once you go to look at your different jurisdiction, you just change the names based on how they're referred to. And that's something that can be done in the back end. And also add things. You can add, remove things, right? So that's how we planned it all along to work.
Now, a while ago, Aileen, you wrote a book on task codes and M&A transactions. I mean, listening to Lann, to Kevin, to Jim about the experiences with actually establishing structures, if you like, and organizing your transactions like that. I mean, what's your take on this from your experience?
Just wrote it into the comments in the chat.
Oh, yeah. Is it? Okay.
Ignace, go ahead. Yeah.
We wrote two books.
Sorry.
It's okay.
The
one in the chat was the second book. The first book was in response to the fact that the UTBMS codes had all the flaws that Jim identified, and obviously Kevin and Lann. And so I was involved with the task force on how to use project management practices to improve the efficiency and quality of M&A transactions. In the course of that, we were developing a budgeting tool. And as part of that budgeting tool, we created a taxonomy for M&A codes. The premise behind that was that the way in which the leads codes captured data was not simple enough for a lawyer to understand. And therefore, we had to create something for M&A with both the smallest number of phases, detailed explanations about what was comprised within each phase, and then let the market decide whether or not it was sufficient. So we didn't promulgate the codes from the vantage point of saying this is the definitive code set. It was just an attempt to try to create a more thoughtful framework and methodology for using codes. Now, in fact, one of the first things we found out after those codes were promulgated was the in-house legal folks thought that it wasn't detailed enough in the section that dealt with due diligence, because it just treated due diligence as a single phase. And as we know, how we break down the work for good process flows of handling due diligence requires allocation of roles and responsibilities between in-house people, law firm people, a data room, vendors, third parties. So one of the areas that was critiqued and augmented was focused on the due diligence area. We wrote the book on how to apply the codes for M&A. We talked at length about good timekeeping practices and data collection practices. We were less focused on the technology back end. We were more focused on the human side of compliance. Number one, because machine learning and having the ability to read what's in the time records was not as evolved when we wrote this, believe it or not, 3 or 4 years ago, how quickly things have evolved. Machines can learn, so can we. And secondly, it was much more about changing the way people think about having taxonomies and frameworks for capturing the data. SALI was just a glimmer in everybody's eyes at that point. So we dropped a footnote in there and made mention to this thing called SALI, which fortunately has taken off. And when we went around talking to people about the book, we said everything in here also applies to all other kinds of matters, because what we're articulating here is a framework, a methodology, and a way of thinking about behavior in capturing information, both from lawyers and being able to use it for the data analytics. And they said, well, I don't want to read your book. It's called M&A. And I do patent work. I do litigation. I do regulatory work. I can't reason by analogy. I don't care if I'm a lawyer. I need something that speaks to me. So the consequence of that is that we wrote the second book called Legal Value Track. And what we did was we updated what we did, and we started talking about what is value, about the way in which capturing codes enables one to start doing what Lann and Kevin just talked about, which is start drawing a linkage between the data, the timekeeping records, the financial system, and business value, which is very much about Jim and Sally's focus on outputs. So we raised all of this in the book. And then we went on to basically amend and restate what we did in the M&A book, applied it to other areas of law. For everybody on this call, I think if you pick it up, you'll find it obvious and basic. But from the vantage point of those of you who are trying to convince others to come along with where you are, I've always found that it's worthwhile to have it written down in a book with a copyright from a couple of years ago, emphasizing the fact that this is not a new idea. And so in addition to describing some of the work that I've tried to help support over the years, I am shamelessly promoting Buy My Book. It's a great Christmas present. You can get it on Amazon. No, but in all seriousness, we have no intention of updating the book. It's there. We've had our publishing experience, and now we've come upon greater minds like Inyas and everybody else on this call who are trying to get their word out and convey great ideas through these kinds of meetups and publishing with a broader based publisher.
Thank you. You should have offered us some sort of actually special rebate or anything.
Well, anybody.
Where is that? When is that coming? Actually,
can you guarantee it will arrive in time for Christmas, Aileen?
Let's put it this way: if you order it this week, I can. And because I've got a stock here in my house that I can put into the mail. And secondly, if you want rebates or you want discounts, get in touch with me. We can work something out. I'm just giving you the publicly available information.
So
I'm always willing to do a private deal with friends.
You can drive close to the border or maybe throw it across.
Yeah, really, really. Yeah, David and I live 4 hours apart. And so, we live in, between him in Montreal and me near Albany. We're trying to figure out how to smuggle all sorts of things back and forth.
The NSA is listening to this conversation, so I would take that back pretty quickly.
Yeah, back to some serious business here, folks. The one thing that we don't have in Europe and elsewhere is actually billing service providers. I was always wondering, and then so the question goes out to you, actually, Kevin, Lann, Jim, Aileen, and others who may want to contribute. Is have those actually sort of offerings driven the adoption rate of task codes?
What offerings?
The billing service providers, Legal Bill and the others. Or would you say that had no impact at all actually on the adoption rate?
Doing compliance software and things like that.
Yeah. No, so they're basically they're using your client your invoices that law firms actually send to general counsel. They sit in the middle as intermediaries.
A legal tracker.
Legal
right?
tracker, yes,
Yeah.
ELM or ELM and what have you, yes.
It's helped. It's helped. I think some attorneys see the value in the coding because we're able to down the road show them how they're handling work,
Okay.
which in turn you can present to the client, how we're improving. Others, I think, are still resistant to categorize their creative art of law in that way. So.
Yeah, I would only add that it's a starting point for a conversation about why a client might value that kind of taxonomy, how they're using that information, how we can add value to them by having good hygiene practices, and potentially by reporting some of that information up in a way that they can share it with their business partners. On its own, just handing bills through an e-billing system isn't a guarantee that the lawyers will recognize what this is all about and how to kind of leverage it. So.
No, it just, what we observed when Legal Bill Europe was set up and they failed miserably, they've now, these guys actually went back to the US, was they forced everybody to actually comply with a system of codes. Otherwise, they would have rejected your invoices from, and therefore actually non-payment was as bad as actually write-offs. But they failed because the market as such, the fraternity managed to somewhat find ways to get around it. And eventually there were not enough clients actually buying into this concept of a legal service billing provider and somebody sitting right in the middle. But apparently the US business is still up and running. I mean, the legal tracker and the likes they're still alive and obviously healthy, but it has never taken off anywhere outside the US. And some people claim that they have driven the idea of actually task codes, actually sort of the whole coding aspect of invoices.
Well, I think because they're limited. I mean, as we talked about, the data you get from them doesn't serve the purposes that we want them to. So
Okay.
they're not going to go far. I think it's all about clients that have somebody internally who's pushing it.
Okay.
That happens, then there's going to be more adoption. That's really what I see. It's more about the client and who's involved and if they think this is important or not.
I would come back to the same point. It's not about technology or vendors. It's about the message that your counterparty, your colleague, your client articulates. It's all got to come back to the personal story that translates into what's in it for me. And I think that whether it's US or anywhere else, it's so much about personal persuasion and a lot less about, oh, we've got a system that can do X and Y. So, if you can't identify the why from a practical point of view that speaks to something that motivates the individual you're talking to, the fact that you've got a system backing it up is interesting, but not sufficient.
talking about a lot of data. That's actually almost a sort of God-given bridge to the next topic. Apart from the fact, by the way, Naomi, you can't get the book in South Africa. You need to ask Aileen to actually courier one, actually straight from Albany. It won't work with Amazon. I've tried that before, unfortunately.
Okay,
just
so
as a sideline
Naomi,
note.
Naomi, if you want to send me an email afterwards, we will figure out how to make this happen, but I can't guarantee by Christmas if it's not coming from an Amazon fulfillment source.
And don't don't send it by postal services.
Yeah, yeah. And I will give you the book for free if you will pay the postage. How's that for me showing good faith?
Great. I was about to say I mentioned the project actually with the 180,000 users at the moment on legal ops. Julian happens to be the project manager, so he's well placed to talk about workflows. And when we originally thought about, or when I thought about the chapter and how to actually address a couple of topics, I always ask myself, what is workflow? What's the role of workflows in legal project management? Because it's not a strict delineation between project and processes. There's quite a lot of process management actually sitting in meta management, as Kevin rightly pointed out. And how do you address that in terms of actually semi-automated flows? How do you actually create enterprise-wide workflows that actually work? And recently I had the pleasure to attend actually a webinar with Dell, and they're looking into their entire legal operations globally and try to sort of find the same treasure in their processes and workflows, and now looking at technologies that really span across the entire enterprise. And so therefore there must be some reason for the topic to be relevant and on everybody's agenda at the moment. And the question is, how is that actually fitting into the broader LPM picture, and what can process management and workflows actually add to our overall legal service delivery? And therefore, over to you, Gillian. You definitely also, if you please actually introduce yourself briefly, and then we look forward to hear a couple of ideas from you.
Sure. Can you enable screen sharing for me, please?
Sorry, this is
that would be nice.
So that's the second most popular actually statement these days. Other than, am I still on mute?
Sure. So first of all, in the meanwhile, let me introduce myself. I'm Julian, co-founder and managing director of SmartForCard, a company that is delivering digital transformation for law firms and for legal departments. And of course, we're including legal project management, legal service portfolio management, and building our own platform for digitizing these solutions and transforming the legal work. Today, I have to say sorry in the name of Christian, my colleague and co-founder and product lead at SmartForCard. He cannot attend today due to holidays. I will take it over on my own today. So let me see. Can I share? Yeah, seems to be. Let me check. This one. Give me a second. So obviously my MacBook is not allowing to share the screen, but it just takes a second. Damn it. I have to restart Zoom to share my screen. Okay, let's do it this way. For the presentation part, it's not a big of a deal. Perhaps Ignaz, you can if I give you a sign, perhaps you can share your screen and show the website we were talking about.
Yes, I can do that.
Yeah. I will just start with my topic. So our topic actually, or the chapter Christian and I wrote was about introducing the concept of workflows in the context of legal project management, and we wanted to present a practical advice related to its application and implementation. So our topic is actually turning legal processes into effective workflows. So the first topic or main topic we had to address is the topic process versus workflow. So actually these are often used as synonyms, and both describe a logical order of activities to achieve one or more objectives. However, they represent actually different levels of transformation. I want to give you a definition from the Workflow Management Coalition, which define business processes as a set of one or more linked procedures or activities which collectively realize a business objective or policy goal, normally within the context of an organizational structure defining functional roles and relationships. And in contrast to that, the definition of workflow is an automation of business processes. So in whole or part, during which documents, information, or tasks are passed from one participant to another for action according to a set of procedural rules. So this is the official definition of the difference between business processes and workflows. But in a nutshell, actually, a process describes actually a sequence of tasks, and a workflow is a way to improve the efficiency of these sequences. What you actually can say is that a workflow is focused on the repeatability of a sequence, and actually to leverage the best way to deliver the intended result, actually. And all this by applying, in most cases, technology. What we did during writing the book, just in addition, because we are currently using these same at our clients, is we created a Ignaz, you can share your screen now, a toolkit actually to transform legal processes. So we created a legal workflow canvas, which is a website, legalworkflowcanvas.com, where you can download with a Creative Commons license, so free of charge, a toolkit with 3 different canvases to use in workshops, or to start for you as a kickstart to trying to define your legal or your business processes to get starting thinking about a workflow that can be implemented in systems. So if you shortly open one of the
just a sec. These things are not. Just share the entire screen.
Let me see. I'm just flipping between a lot of windows. This one, not this one. A second.
So you should be able to see it on screen now.
There you are. Yep, perfect. So actually, wait a moment. So actually, what we created are three different canvases. The first one actually is about the planning phase. So where you have to define the transformation objectives for a business process, or later on the workflow. The stakeholders, like which helps you analyzing or give you an analysis of and helps to align the process with the stakeholders itself. And there you have to, for example, differentiate between primary, secondary, tertiary stakeholders. You have to prioritize the stakeholders, like key partners, latents, defenders, marginals, etc. So in our book chapter, we created a complete let's say manual. You can follow step by step to walk through these canvases, filling out these these topics. And after this, you have to define the transformation team, actually, like the owners, the designers, the validators, and implementers, to get a complete picture in the first part. If you go up to the first page, please, again, to get a full picture of actually the transformation objectives, the stakeholders involved, and the overall transformation team. So an overview of what you're actually talking about, who you have to involve into building and thinking about the process, etc. And then the second one, if you go to the second page, please, it's the analysis and build phase, so to say, where you have the ability to split your or you draw your workflow. Actually, you split it into different phases. In the book, we said that we often start with our clients in 3 different phases, or to split these workflows, or most of the workflows can be split into these phases, like fact-finding, assessment, and action. Where, of course, fact-finding, you start collecting all the data you need for a certain use case. The assessment is the phase where often the legal experts or lawyers take place to analyze the data of the fact-finding and give an assessment on it. And the action phase is completely depends. It can be an automated contract that is built of it, or it can be actually just an email that is sent out, a notification or whatever. Then you have, of course, this process line where you completely show all the steps of the process, where you include all the events, activities, the roles that that have a certain role in this process, the resources, the inputs and outputs in, for example, the action phase, like an email, like a contract, a document, or whatever. And then, of course, the restrictions, in particular in legal processes, is often the case that, like, for example, if you have an investigation use case where you have different roles that can, in a certain stage, only read certain information, or that a role that is only allowed to create an investigation case, but do not or is not able or allowed to follow up on the information collected afterwards. So you have to think about all these restriction a certain use case, and each step of this use case has to brings with as an information. So think about create, restriction, read, update, communication, approve or reject, who is allowed to approve or reject, and when is a certain information has to be archived or deleted. And then if you go to the last page, actually it's all about measure and learn. So build, measure, learn. I think a lot of you already learned about this when creating products, etc. But this applies as well to creating workflows, or think about processes and then create workflows. So what we want the users is to think about the problems in creating a legal workflow canvas. So for example, what does not work well currently, and what can be done better? This typical questions. And in the opportunities part, of course, we want the user to think about really everything without any restrictions. Like, what if we could automate this activity entirely? So what could be done if an AI could do this or that? So completely think about opportunities, even though if they are not currently possible with current technology, but often there's a case that with current technology, certain things are possible to achieve, or at least partly achievable. And then, of course, you need to think about what would be necessary, what do we need to already achieve this, or what what needs to be, what do we need in the future to achieve this? And then, of course, KPIs as last point. Actually, we talked about this earlier in the talk, so I will not go into detail about this. But what I want to give is currently, actually, what we recognize in most companies is that there are even no KPIs for the legal departments or for the law firms. So if you ask them, they're just not able to answer it, because they do not have data. They do not have, beside of costs, they are not. They don't even know what they are actually talking about in terms of numbers, etc. On categorizations of requests, etc. So this is a complete topic that is in most of the law firms and legal departments we talk with is completely new to them, and they just start thinking about possible KPIs and what to do with it. So a complete new topic, and that's actually already it what I wanted to present. So please feel free to download this, have a look onto the canvas. We are going to extend the homepage itself. So currently it is just a short description and the kit that can be downloaded. The complete manual, so to say, is part of our chapter in the book, and we will extend the homepage with a step-by-step guide on each step that has to be performed for this. So we want to give actually the legal industry a tool to already think about use cases and or think about processes in their company, and start thinking about what actually can be turned into a workflow, and where they can start thinking about efficiency and improve efficiency. And of course, it's not only efficiency, but it is as well it's about risk reduction. It is So there are a lot of more benefits actually that give you or that will be given to you. So cost and time savings, risk reduction, analytics and insights, which I already said is a complete new topic, and of course knowledge sharing, which is one topic that is actually in law firms not that common as well. And with this, thank you for your attention, and let's keep talking about all the topics we heard today.
Thank you, Julian. What's the most complex workflow you've seen in legal operations thus far? What would you say based on your experience?
Management of data privacy requests, not requests, but data privacy processing activities. Okay. Because this is a process that is actually that has a really lot of sub processes, etc. that affect the overall process and outcome. So you don't only manage these processing activities, but you have data privacy impact assessments. You have incidents, etc. That again affect a certain evaluation of a processing activity, and all this is actually, you could say these are about 10 processes in total to get one big process or workflow actually. So yeah, this is the absolute biggest one. Investigation from a complexity part would be it is very streamlined, but it was hard to implement in terms of restricting roles, etc. So there we had to really think about how this access management and rights and roles have to be implemented, because there were a lot of different roles that had a lot of different access rights, and this completely globally. So on not on a global level, but globally around the world. So in each country, actually, in about I don't know 180 countries. Or even more, we had we had different access rights, etc. So this was pretty complex from implementation side, even though the process itself is really streamlined.
Great. Any questions, comments?
I was going to ask Julian if, as you're going through the process of working through the different canvases, are you bringing just concepts like from the lean world or the design world into those conversations to help kind of get at what the workflow should be? I just wanted to kind of hear how you think about having those conversations.
Yes, absolutely. So definitely the reiteration of building a process is part of the book as well. So starting and then evaluating in a cycle until you are actually at a stage where you want to have this process. Definitely yes, and as well, of course, this whole topic is about legal design thinking, and in the chapter we help the user, including questions, guiding questions, etc., to accomplish this by lean methods.
So do you use, for instance, user stories and similar approaches?
Yeah, sure. Not in partly in creating the process itself, but mainly afterwards in creating the after we have the process, creating the or we have the workflow, and on the canvas creating the workflow in the digital platform actually. So together with the customer, we use this canvas to create stories out of this.
I was also going to just mention, I think the point you made about knowledge management is really key, because it's often missing at all the places in the workflow or the process where it'd be really helpful to collect, some information or measure something, and just kind of having that in mind as you go through allows you to really bring that to the table, bring that to the forefront.
Yeah, absolutely.
Any other questions? I mean, I did not share the SALI website, so Jim, that's your opportunity to still put it into the chat and advertise that as well next to Aileen's book and Julian's website. So it's your time. Otherwise, people will hopefully find the page. So if there are no more questions, I mean, and this time we're a little bit earlier, but we need to make up for all the overruns we've experienced last time. So overall, we're leveling it out. I think those were a couple of really brilliant insights. And I think we all are grateful for the highlights and the insights actually you've shared. Kevin and Lann, also in terms of actually something like using AI in order to sort of assist the narrative drafting, which is actually a pain in the back for all of you. It has always been, and it has always been an ongoing debate, a very contentious debate, obviously, but also actually understanding what KPIs can and should actually deliver, other than just actually pure reflections of some mere financials. Obviously, I mean, kudos to SALI. I mean, Jim, personally, I'm a huge fan, and I know your fan community is growing by the hour. I mean, because the work you've been doing deserves actually a massive marketing campaign across the entire legal planet, because it's just adding so much value to what we do. And then, yeah, last but not least, the Julian, also great stuff. I think workflow is widely underestimated. I mean, and getting lawyers to actually think in processes is one thing to accomplish, and still actually a steep hill to climb for many of us on a daily basis. So that's also actually, I think we widely appreciate those kind of efforts. Next time, if I may give a quick outlook, we'll have the pleasure to welcome Sebastian, who has already left, from Baker McKenzie, and Jasmine from a legal innovation hub, actually talking about legal design for legal project management, what legal design can actually add to legal project management. And we'll then actually hear more about change management in legal project management and change management overall from CJ Nicastro from Standard & Poor's, who's actually running one of their legal operations teams. So that will actually offer a lot of insight and experience. And last but not least, once more, Naomi, you and Julie will talk about risk management, something that's also, I mean, I can tell from my own experience in my project management trainings, it's usually ignored because lawyers always tend to believe that risk management is something they advise on, but they don't need to keep an eye on when it comes down to legal service delivery, but a very important aspect. And so we're looking forward to your input, your big LPIM idea. Other than that, I'm looking forward to seeing you again. Thanks for your contribution today, and all the best. Stay healthy. As usual, keep safe, and see you next week, hopefully. So thank you and take care. Bye-bye.